Hello. In this video we're going to look at using Boundary Builder to define a set of boundaries around a larger map and then also placing some prefabs along that boundary. So I'm going to first open the Boundary Builder window and dock it by my hierarchy, and this is an example of maybe a racetrack that want to keep racers inside the track, but I want to be able to also put obstacles or somehow define those walls so that it's not an invisible wall. So I'm going to define inside boundary and then just start adding nodes, and so my collision layer actually is default, but I want that to be terrain because my terrain here is on the terrain layer. So just change that. So now as I click, it will just start creating the inside. Zoom in here. Just kind of quickly put that around. So what that's going to do eventually is create a mesh collider with the shape of this kind of what I would call it's a kind of a dummy mesh. So that's just going to show us where the mesh is going to be, and obviously I don't want the player to be able to get under any of these. So if we have a longer sections, there might be portions that are not exactly all the way down. So I'm just going to increase the Y extend, and that will take it below the terrain just a little bit, and then boundary height, take that up, and then click save. And so I have a mesh renderer that is just a default. I think the actual asset has a material for these, but this one's just a default no material. And then obviously we can click on the mesh collider, and that will give us a the mesh collider object for physics. Okay, so now I want to do the outside, so I'm just going to add another boundary. And you'll notice this is creating objects within the scene, and those are just kind of the root objects that prefabs get added to. So I'm just going to do the same kind of thing here, this time going along the outside. Let's do a real rough one here. So I'm trying my best not to put the nodes too close together, and I looped both of them so that they're both closed. And I'm going to do the same Y extend as my other one. And since this one needs to be switched, I'm just going to click reverse normals so that the mesh keeps things inside the two. Okay, so now I want to add some prefabs, and obviously this is the point that you'll start seeing where your boundary might need to move, and we'll get to modifying that, but I'm just going to select the inside boundary and click add prefab a few times. So I'm going to add 3, and I might as well close this down. And so I'm just going to use these trees. It's really basic trees, so just drag and drop the prefab objects into here. Okay, so the prefab placement is set to best fit, so that's just going to try and fit as many prefabs as it can. It chooses randomly. The selection is random, so it's just going to choose one and place it, and then go throughout the whole boundary. So just to see what that looks like, we'll just click place prefabs. So like I said, it just places them as it can, as it sees fit, and that if we look at one of the prefabs, there is a box collider around it that defines its bounds. So that is what's being used to just kind of place them. So first thing I'm noticing is that, I mean, trees technically tend to grow straight up, right? So a lot of times you don't want it to follow the terrain. You want it to be straight up. So I'm just going to select the boundary. I'm going to go to each one of the prefabs, and instead of follow path, I'm going to make it go straight up. All those, and then just click place prefabs again. So again, I got a new random selection, which I can do as many times as I want here, but you can see that they are all standing straight up. Okay, so obviously this needs some variety, so I'm just going to add a couple more. Maybe we'll put flat rock. I'll put that rock in between some of them, and maybe this log. We'll put a log in there too. And I do want those to follow paths so that they kind of sit on top of the terrain. And okay, so now I see that the log is going the wrong way. I want it to kind of go along the path here. So you could modify the prefab, or you can just go to the rock rotation, and instead of length, change that to width, and then we'll place those again. Oh, I'm sorry, I changed the rock, so the log. Change that to width. There we go. Okay. Yeah. So now we just kind of randomly get rocks, and you'll see that it's fitting the rocks in there kind of as it can. Which you know, the more variety that you add to this, the better that's going to be. Or if I want to ensure that these the rocks are not so closely placed together, I could just increase the size of, well, actually that's probably why, because it doesn't have a box collider around it. Oh, no, it does. So, oh, okay. So here we go. This is the prefab collider delete. So the colliders were deleted from the prefabs after they were placed. So again, like I said, I could modify this collider to be just a little bit larger so that I don't get a whole bunch of rocks sitting right next to each other. I want to give it a little bit of room. So now I have the issue where I've created, made the change and applied it to my prefab, but it didn't make any change to these. So if I would have maybe made a change to the model itself, then I could just come to the boundary and click the update prefab references, and that would replace the ones in the boundary with the new prefab. But that obviously didn't do anything here, because the boundary, the box bounds collider is determining the placement. So I'll have to place those again in order to have it recalculate the distance between the rocks. Okay, so that's just a really basic use case. Obviously, like I said, more detail you put around these, the better. Just to give you an interesting thing. So I guess now I'll show the other placement type, which is PostInfill. So PostInfill will, at each node, so the nodes are these little purple balls. So every time I clicked, it created a node. So it will, at the node locations, it will place a random prefab that is marked with post. So I have a lamp here that I would like to place at every node location. So I'm going to go to the outside, and I'm going to add that prefab here, and I'm going to mark it as a post. And I also want it always to be straight up, so I'm going to change that to straight up. And then in between those, I want to put a fence. So I've got a fence prefab here, and again, they both have just basic box colliders at their root level. And I'll add that fence prefab here, and I'll place. Okay, so now the problem is that I want the lamp to, I want this light to be on the path. I want it to be inside here. So I'll just go to the lamp prefab, and we'll change the rotation would change whether it's, well, I guess we can see what that looks like. So that changed that, but that's not exactly what I want. So I'm going to put it on length, but then that's what this flip button. So if I place those again, then if I flip, it's just going to flip the positions on that other axis. So really, with these two things, you have the ability to have it do whatever you, whatever orientation. Obviously, a random orientation is going to give. Oh, that was on the fence. So that's going to give just a really, random. So obviously, we want to have that. So you'll notice that since the objects, the fence prefab is on orient to follow path, and it's also follow node rotation. So if I wanted, say maybe this section to be maybe tilted out, I wanted this fence to be kind of tilted outwards, I can modify the boundary by drawing handles, and that'll put a handle at every node location. I'll enable rotation handles, and I'm just going to rotate that guy backwards. So that's changing the orientation of the boundary itself. And so with this follow node rotation on, then that's going to tilt all of those back to follow that node rotation. So yeah, so that's one of the kind of benefits of this tool as opposed to some of the other tools on the asset store, is that when I have terrain that is kind of special shape, then when I do have the ability to match collision normal, you can have it match the actual normal, the physical normal of the surface. So it really doesn't matter at all what object you're placing it on. If I were to have a completely upside down plane, put that on my terrain layer, clear this guy and just add some new nodes, then it's going to follow the normal of that object. So one of the benefits there. So yeah, any questions, let me know. I'll put some links in the description for my email, and also to the asset itself. Thanks for watching.